Hi, Hendrik. How are you today?
Hello, Lorraine. No,
Lauriane, it's good.
Lauriane. I have this still off. My way of pronouncing it.
It's
Lauriane.
fine.
Lauriane. There, now we got it. Hello. Pleasure being
Hi.
here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview. So you are doing this interview for our 3-week program starting October 31st, this Saturday, called Next Gen Lead, which is a pioneer program that is going to, unite all the young leaders of the world and help them learn more about how to become a responsible leader or to be sustainable. And so today I'm going to interview you because you want to share a personal story of your path, what you lived, that you think will be really interested. So to present myself, I was in Oikos Lille chapter. I was Secretary General of Oikos Lille. Um, I then moved here to New York City. Now I'm an alumni of COSIL and I'm also part of the advisory board for there. And additionally, for Next Gen Lead, I take up the communication part. I handle the Instagram, and I also help with everything linked to communication, website, and everything. So again, it's really nice to have you here. Can you present yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here and give you guys some impulses, I guess, from my story. Yeah, Hendrik, German, 26-year-old freelance entrepreneur, host, coach, facilitator, trainer, all the beautiful words that people uh, try to explain what I'm doing with. Yeah, so I graduated in Leuphana University in north of Germany, business administrations, e-business, and sustainable city development, and yeah, spent 6 years in IESEC, similar to Oikos, student-run organization sending people abroad in different parts of the world, working there. The last role there was in Oman, and then becoming the guy who trained the trainers. So I certified people in training, and now I'm a freelance trainer, training competences, helping people with their capacity building to navigate life. I'm very entwined in mindfulness. I'm also a yoga teacher, creating conferences and retreats for personal development and guiding people through all the beautiful challenges that we are confronted with if we dive on our evolution development journey and going back in our story, and also doing the healing work to really step in our light and go into our capacity to be as the best versions of ourselves as human beings.
Can you just talk me briefly, because I went on your website and I saw that you had a tribe called the Inner World Tribe. Can you
True.
talk me briefly about that?
Yes. So COVID came around beginning of the year, and as a freelance trainer who usually does physical work, I kind of was out of work from one day or another when they canceled every event that was planned. And I kind of reconnected to what do I really want to bring into the world. And that sentence that is guiding me, and that might be a bit abstract for people, but it's like it really resonates with me. It's I'm here to serve the evolution of the self. And that for me is my passion is this holding space for transformation. And I do usually a couple conferences, mainly one in Portugal, that's very much working on personal development through a very unique process. Bit similar, probably what you guys going to go on during these 3 weeks. And my question was, how can I digitalize this? So I just created a virtual retreat. And it was the whole thing took me 48 hours to have the idea, to create the website, to kick it off. A week later, I had my participants. I had 4 people going through this process with me. One of them later joined me, and we have been experimenting in the last 6 months on different formats. We started a podcast now, the Conscious Practice podcast, which you, if you're interested, you can listen to as well. We're still figuring this out and exploring different topics in order to now create a playground for the inner world, because there's way too little space to practice this. I think the student initiatives are a very beautiful space to practice. That's why I'm a big advocate, and I don't really care if you're part of ISEC or ICOS or all the other beautiful big organizations. It's a beautiful place to grow and test and learn. Because when you go from university, where you pretty much never really practice the hard skills of working with people and being alive in the world, it's just only cognitive. It's not embodied experiences. So now we're in the finding process. We're just starting next week with a handful of people, really like a design thinking process to create something new. And yeah, there will be something coming up in the next months and years to come. For me, this is like a life dedication. I'm going to continue creating spaces mainly for young people in the next years, and then also for other humans who want to face the challenges that come, as said, with evolving and healing. And that's what the inner world tribe and core essence is about: is how do we want to live? How can we live more fulfilled and purposeful lives? And I think everybody has an own answer to that, but then there are underlying principles and structures when you go into old theories and wisdom practices and spiritual practices, but also modern science comes up with very beautiful theories these days. So yeah, that's pretty much a little impulse of what we're doing there.
Thank you for sharing about it. I was really, really intrigued by this tribe, and I
Check it
really
out.
wanted to hear. I really liked your website, and I was really inspired by it. So yeah, definitely check it out. So now we're gonna move to the story. So the first one you want to share today, you told me, is a personal story that really cover most of the core competence we're covered during Next Gen Lead. So I will let you then tell us what you want to share today, this story, and then after that we'll talk about more questions about what you really want people to remember from your story. So I'll let you go.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was thinking about what's a personal story that is kind of unique and impacted me a lot, and I have been coming back to this story, sharing it with people, explaining when people ask, "How did you end up doing what you're doing?" And having done so much inner work already with, like, I'm a regular meditator for 6-7 years now, really deep in practice of yoga and have brought a lot of consciousness and self-awareness in my life. And all the beautiful other part of the core competence is thinking about my values. How do I interact with the world? How is change happening? And going away from linear thinking to systematic thinking. And there's this one story that stuck with me when I moved to the US when I was 16 for a year and did my 10th grade of high school there in a beautiful boarding school. It was a beautiful year. And in spring break, instead of like going back home or going to the typical spring break trips you do, I went on a mission. So it was an evangelic boarding school. So I went with the church from there, and I was an atheist at the time. Today I would call myself spiritual. We went to the rural northern area of Kenya in the middle of nowhere in 2011. So that's a while back now. And for 10 days we were there, and we were building up a computer lab for school there. And because they were getting internet for the first time in history of the area, they were building up a tower. And we bought computers, we set up the computer lab, we taught them a bit how to use a computer. And that was just fascinating already, like teaching 15, 16-year-olds how to use a computer who have never seen a computer really before and kind of were familiar with TV. And that's like, there are a lot of little things I could jump into during that 10 days. Like that was very transformative. We also did a safari and stuff at the end, like typical tourist things, but really being a week into this rural area, also a night spending with a family. I mean, that was like the second oldest was hosting me, and she was 15, and the oldest brother, no, she was 16. Her oldest brother was 21, but he was working in Nairobi. The parents both died from AIDS. They're two younger siblings, and they're hosting and feeding me for a whole night. And I'm like, as this privileged European being there and then they're very religious. So they're asked me to say the prayer and read something from the Bible. And the atheist in me was really like, back then I was so against religious dogma, and like been in contact with so much of the harm that religion, in my opinion, back then had created, and very stuck in that worldview that I constructed as a 16-year-old middle class northern white man European. Mhm. And I was but I said, okay, no, I'm here, I'm a guest, so I'm gonna stick to it. And there was going through that, being really faced with that internal dialogue. And I think it was one of the first moments where I really had that internal dialogue of like, whoa, okay, there's my view, but I'm a guest here, and then who am I to say anything right now? I'm getting one of the free beds they have, and they're all cuddling together in this mud hug. And it was just, whoa. It was just one. Like, there were multiple little stories I can continue to share here. And I think that was one of the most impactful one was that. But the one thing that truly, truly stuck with me was on the last day or second to last day, we had a Q&A session with all the kids from the school, and they're asking us questions. And then we got like some fun questions and some normal ones. But then the one question that I will never forget in the rest of my life was this 14-year-old girl raised her hand, and then she asked, "What are we eating to be white? What are we eating to be white?" And we were all a bit baffled by that question. Like, how do you construct that reality in your head to ask? I mean, you're going to school, you're like, but how do you come up with that question? And I, like, back then I couldn't really grasp it, but we're like, okay, it has nothing to do with food. We kind of were explaining that. But there wasn't a joke. Like, she was very serious about it too. There was true curiosity in the way she asked that question. It was like, that's how it makes sense to me why you are white and I have black skin and you have white skin. Like, where does that come from? And for me, like, later on, I went back, like, when you watch TV and then I mean, we were an American group. I was the only European, so I was American for everybody as well. Uh, the differentiation between this is a European coming from the US, this doesn't make any sense. But they're watching TV, and then you see this commercial of Coca-Cola, because you still get Coca-Cola there. Like, their Coca-Cola is crazy. Brilliant from a logistic perspective. I'm not a promoter for their drinks these days anymore, out of health reasons. But you're watching this American commercials about McDonald's, Coca-Cola, KFC, etc., and you just see they're eating different food. And if I eat different food, I get sick. So my body reacts to the food I'm eating. So the construction to make that link makes total sense to me now, to build that bridge between I'm eating something different, so my body reacts different. So the likelihood if I eat something consistently different means that I start looking different. So that, coming to that conclusion of like, what are you eating to be white, makes, like, I can see now how she came up with that. But that was one of the first moments ever in my life, I think, where I was really, I mean, the US was a culture shock, but coming back to Germany, my parents moved to South Germany, it was even a bigger culture shock. But how we are all as human beings constructing reality we live in through the experiences we have, through the culture influences we have, the people who surround us, by the stories we tell each other. And then our brain still tries to somehow make sense of all of this. And we're all constructing reality, and we all live in our own subjective reality. So if she has this question, how many questions do I have who sound like this to someone who is like looking at the world in a different place? How often have I asked my version of what do you eat to be white? And how many of these questions do I hold in my side and myself? But I'm not even aware that this is a ridiculous question. And just like that was one of the tipping points for me to really come to realize, okay, we all construct reality, we all look at the world differently, and really started my search for self-inquiry, to self-awareness, being very clear about like, okay, what values do I base my worldview on? Like, what are my ethical rules? Can I change them? Obviously, there's theory and development areas in psychology that really says, yes, you can change. And then there are all these spiritual people who talk about like, and then there was this moment I became a whole different being. So we can, once we start making different choices, we can start becoming different individuals, and we can start looking at the world differently. And that moment, getting that question, being completely baffled, and then like, how can you come up with that? That was a major shift for me. And yeah, my invitation in a way is where are you asking these kind of questions, not being aware that it might be ridiculous because you don't have a certain perspective yet. You haven't looked, you're not self-aware about this. And I'm doing a lot of body work, and I'm doing a lot of emotional, social emotional work, and also into like cognitive development. And then it all plays together, and it's not separate from each other. It's all intertwined. And were you still thinking linear, not systematically? All these questions that raise because there are certain and evolutionary hierarchies involved with this. But I'm not a better human being because I have a more complex view and more perspective around the world than that 14-year-old girl in the rural area of Kenya. We both have the same worth. We both have the same dignity. I just have the experience and the perspective and the knowledge from past like education to construct and see the world in a different way. And then differentiating these two, I mean, that's always a part of the if you work with evolutionary theory and development. Yes, I'm farther developed, but I'm not a better human with you. But like noticing these hierarchies without attaching worth to them is crazy. And I'm on my path. I'm in my practice, but I dedicate my life to really become that more higher, best version of that me that I could be or can become, am becoming. If I want to be presumptuous, that I'm becoming that version already. Yeah, I think that's it from that story. You said you have one or two other questions.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing this story, Hendrik. It was really inspiring, really interesting. If there would be one, no, I think I'll start with the practice. What do you think would be the best practice to avoid this type of issues, or really, I guess what I get from your story is that misunderstanding and like a different point of view, different world view. What can we do to better understand a person who doesn't have the same worldview, or to maybe not sound judgy, or to not be to not be in this I guess position where we feel better, or we just judge the person or feel like they don't understand. What can we do as responsible leader to avoid this?
Curiosity. That would be the simplest answer, because your brain is incapable of judgment if you go into curiosity. It's a neurochemical impossibility to judge if you go into inquiry and curiosity. If you actually explore, ask open question without the idea of like there needs to be a specific outcome, you really go into curiosity, then the awe of the world and people just becomes beautiful. So that would be the practice. I could definitely go there, because I could have judged that girl and said, I was like, oh, where does that reality come from? Where does this reality come from? And that just, you see my reaction already. Like I'm noticing it's like this is like joy and like this is cool. Yeah. So
I think
curiosity.
that's actually a really interesting reaction for a 16-year-old boy, because you would think that maybe a lot of other people would not be like this. So that's interesting. That was like a eureka movement for you, kind of. And then my second question would be, what is the best? Oh, sorry, no, I asked that already. What is the main message you want people who watch this, your story, to remember? If there will be like one message.
Be humble. Be humble and be aware that you have your version of what do you eat to be white inside of yourself. We all do. We all continue to do, and that never stops. So always be humble with your perception of the world and connected with the curiosity. I think that's a beautiful start. If you have that in mind, okay, well, and people don't mean it on a bad way. If they say something that you perceive as stupid or weird, just stay humble with your opinion making and your judgment, and you'll like, oh, maybe I have that too. together with curiosity, I think then we are on a beautiful path if we do that more. Especially as responsible leaders, I think curiosity and humility are two very important values and principles.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing this story again, this personal story with me and with everybody who's watching doing the Next Gen Lead program.